After Dead Alive and before the Lord of the Rings trilogy, there was the Frighteners. It started off as a concept for a Tales from the Crypt episode, and expanded beyond the limitations of a half-hour format. It's also loaded to the brim with familiar faces. When a town is plagued with mysterious tragedies, a psychic con man might be the only one who can put a stop to it, with the help of the deceased. This is my review of The Frighteners. The movie opens on a dark, stormy night in a spooky house, just to set the mood properly, you see. The residents of said house, Patricia Bradley, played by Dee Wallace, and her mother, played by Juliana McCarthy, are being tormented by some poltergeist-like entity. This isn't the only odd occurrence. A number of Fairwater residents have been dropping dead. Supposedly, heart attacks are to blame. Someone who's trying to capitalize on these deaths is Frank Bannister, played by Michael J. Fox.
Frank Bannister, psychic investigator? That's right. Well, that's a good one. How come you didn't see the corner coming?
Meanwhile, back at the Bradley house, Dr. Lucy Linsky, played by Trini Alvarado, has arrived to tend to Patricia's wounds that she got last night. It doesn't take long for Lucy to realize just how odd Mrs. Bradley is.
They said she was an accessory after the fact. I know the truth. It was cold-blooded murder.
Yeah, I'd be requesting never to be sent here again after being threatened by Dracula's hairstylist. Mrs. Bradley's ominous words are not without reason, as it turns out. Some number of years ago, an orderly at the hospital run by the Bradleys, named Johnny Bartlett, played by Jake Busey, went on a killing spree within the building. Patricia was in a relationship with him, so she was the subject of persecution as well. That's why when Johnny was electrocuted, she was sentenced to house arrest, essentially. You can't dwell on serial killers that much when your whole house goes paranormal activity on your ass. I hate it when I'm trying to watch a true crime documentary and Casper starts throwing shit across the room. Lucy doesn't hesitate to call Frank, even though her husband, Ray, played by Peter Dobson, isn't pleased with the idea. After Frank exorcises the ghosts in the Linsky household, he's promptly escorted out by Ray, but not before Frank notices the number 37 burned into Ray's forehead. Regardless of this, we learn that in order to make money, Frank utilizes the help of Cyrus, played by Chi McBride, Stewart, played by Jim Fife, and Judge, played by John Astin. His goal is to make enough money to actually finish his unfinished house. However, upon arriving at one of the more high-paying jobs, Frank discovers that the local newspaper editor, Magda Reese-Jones, played by Elizabeth Hawthorne, has been telling everyone that he's a fraud. She's not totally wrong. So I guess that's gonna hurt business for a while. On his way out, Frank almost gets run over by a funeral procession, and the spirit of the one this is all for, Ray. Frank ensures that Ray can attend his funeral, and has a little talk with Sheriff Perry, played by Troy Evans. The sheriff fills Frank in on how Ray is the latest victim in this mysterious health epidemic going around town. They look like heart attacks, but there's no physical evidence to support that theory. Lucy spots Frank, and he passes along a message from Ray. This brings third wheeling to a whole new level. Oh yeah, there's also this! At least he washed his hands before he died. Frank heads out to chase after this Grim Reaper entity. This, combined with leaving a restroom where a dead body was found, doesn't exactly make him look good in the eyes of the law. While Lucy is questioned by the police, Special Agent Milton Dammers, played by Jeffrey Combs, arrives. He's been called in due to the supernatural elements of events around town. I'm sure he's the right guy for the job. Dammers provides some background on Frank and his wife Deborah, played by Angela Bloomfield, thus expanding upon what Frank had mentioned to Lucy during their dinner. A handful of years ago, after arguing, they drove off, getting into an accident which seemed to kill Deborah.
Deborah's corpse had the number 13 carved into its forehead.
Frank's pursuit of the cloaked figure leads him to the museum, where Magda's go-to writer Steve, played by the late Jonathan Blick, has just become the latest victim, and apparently Magda herself is next. That is, if Frank doesn't get to her first.
Yes! They don't call me the hanging judge for nothing.
We're just gonna move right on by that. With the help of his ghost friends, Frank is able to evade the police, and rescue Magda, though Judge does get sliced in half in the process. More bad news is while Frank is trying to make an escape, the Reaper shows up and causes him to have a wreck, then kills Magda. What else does Frank have to do but turn himself in? Lucy isn't ready to give up on him yet. However, under interrogation by Dammers, Frank's not doing so great psychologically. Dammers is convinced that Frank uses some sort of telekinetic powers to kill, and the Reaper is a figment of his imagination. While Lucy has a look around Frank's house, she finds a garden in place of a former basketball court. She also hears a call from Mrs. Bradley regarding her daughter. She goes there to help Patricia since it seems her mother is off her rocker. During this little visit, she learns a few things, like Patricia has to keep the ashes of her father in her room because Mrs. Bradley tells her that it's her fault that her father offed himself. She believes Patricia is just like Johnny, and while she is hiding from Mrs. Bradley, Lucy finds Frank's carpenter knife in her closet. Ray gives Lucy the time needed to get out of the house by sacrificing himself to the Reaper who is lurking around. Lucy immediately goes to Frank with this information, but Frank's kinda shut down here.
No, I'd be outside. This shit is like walking in on your parents.
Just in time as the Reaper's back and focused on Lucy. Thanks to both Cyrus and Stuart sacrificing their ectoplasmic asses, Frank and Lucy escape, but that means that they are without a means to fend off the Reaper.
I gotta have an out-of-body experience. What? And I gotta have it right now. No! Go away, Lucy. Just walk the other way.
Thankfully, Lucy has a less permanent alternative. Going the Walt Disney route, huh? Of course, Dammers has to show up to throw things off. At least Frank is actually able to combat the Reaper while Lucy contends with Dammers, whom, by the way, needs some intensive therapy. Everything comes to a bit of a head. Lucy just needs to get back and resuscitate Frank before it's too late. In the meantime, Frank finally uncovers who this Grim Reaper asshole is.
Johnny Bartlett.
Well, Frank almost got him. He does pass along the information to Lucy and insists that she get Patricia out before Johnny can get to her. There's just one problem with that.
Oh, Patricia. You kill her. I'll watch.
When Lucy finds Mrs. Bradley's body, it really kind of seals the deal on her hauling ass out of there. Naturally, Johnny makes that impossible. Thankfully, Frank shows up in time to save Lucy and seal Johnny's soul in the urn Patricia has been keeping. New goal: get Johnny's ashes and soul to a church. Conveniently, there's a chapel in the hospital right next door. And, where is that? When you have a crazed woman toting a shotgun on your heels, it makes things a touch more time-sensitive. Frank's psychic abilities do come in handy, as they allow him to find out where the chapel is. They also allow him to see some of the events that took place. The day Johnny and Patricia brought hell to the hospital. These moments are both creepy as hell, and a bit of a detriment. It's like being in the middle of an action-filled portion of a video game, and all of a sudden a cutscene interrupts everything. In a moment where they get separated, Lucy gets stuck in an elevator, but Frank has found the chapel, so he takes Johnny's urn and attempts to break into the holy place. Unfortunately, there's a new problem, or rather a returning one, in that Dammers has tracked them down, and holds the urn in his leather-clad hand. He doesn't hesitate to release the ashes, thus letting Johnny loose again.
You are such an asshole.
Yes, I am. I'm an asshole.
With a noose.
Well, Frank's down for the count, but Dammers is down permanently. Lucy goes to aid Frank, but Patricia and Johnny are there to finish the job. Interestingly enough, Frank learns something rather important during this time.
You killed her.
After Patricia chokes Frank out, it is time to eviscerate Lucy. Frank manages to extract Patricia's spirit and lure Johnny up the stairway to heaven. Frank makes it, but Patricia and Johnny don't. Japan would like to have a word. So that's 2 psycho killers taken care of. Now what? According to Deborah, it's time to go home. Frank will get another chance to live his life, hopefully happily. Starting with a picnic while watching your half-baked house being destroyed isn't bad. How does Dammers look even worse as a ghost? And one last twist.
When you go through a traumatic experience, it kind of alters your perception.
And with that, the credits roll with the classic Don't Fear the Reaper by the Mutton Birds. I love the cast. Everyone knew the assignment. I think it goes without saying that my favorite is Michael J. Fox as Frank. He has a beautiful character arc, though Dee Wallace was fantastic as a psycho bitch, and Jeffrey Combs once again portraying an unhinged character. Soundtrack by Danny Elfman. That's it. That's all I've got to say about that. Okay, I lied. There are portions of the score that literally cause my hair to stand up, and other portions that capture the lighthearted nature of scenes. It all follows the moods of the scenes flawlessly. The atmosphere and settings throughout are spectacular. Obviously, this was filmed in New Zealand, yet it does have some United States vibes. To me, it feels like some combination of both inside and outside of America. I adore the gloomy and rainy portions, of which there are plenty. It's just the perfect atmosphere for a ghost story. Something that I've heard in regards to the special effects is that they just don't look good. They look cheap or fake or what have you. To that, I would like to point this out.
That looked freaking sweet!
That was really good.
Watching the behind the scenes and making of the Frighteners shows a lot of what went into the making of these effects. Yes, you can pick things out, and perhaps certain things can look cheesy to some. With my taste in horror, I adore the balance that the Frighteners has. It has truly horrific and frightening things, but also has moments of levity and humor. One does not outweigh the other, or take away from the impact of the next. On a similar note, there is no one character that acts as comedy relief. There are several, and that includes Frank. The climax is genuinely intense. It feels like the main characters are in real danger. The antagonists are terrifying. I've always felt that the story of the Frighteners is a beautiful way to convey grief, and life beyond the death of someone important in your life. It also brings up the concept of letting go. The ghost characters have more of a life than Frank does after the death of his wife. Frank is living, but he doesn't really have a life. I really do have to commend each and every actor who had to pretend they were talking to / interacting with a ghost, as well as the ghost actors themselves. For one, if you're someone who has to act like you're having a conversation with a ghost, there's no one there to bounce off of, at least not physically where they should be, and vice versa as a ghost actor. I never felt like someone was trying really hard to achieve a natural feel to scenes like that and failed, and that could have easily happened. I know I mentioned the CGI looking good, but I will admit there are moments that aren't so great. On the plus side, they are brief and they are minor. In terms of the mystery element of the story, I assume that it's not too difficult for a lot of people to figure out that Patricia is the one the protagonists should be afraid of. It might take a bit to realize that. I don't think trying to direct the antagonist label to Mrs. Bradley worked too well. At the same time, I would be shocked if someone told me they knew exactly where things were going at all times during a first watch. With all that being said, I'm giving the Frighteners 10 out of 10 bloody thumbs up. You can thank the Frighteners for kickstarting Jackson, tackling Tolkien's immortal classic. I believe that Jackson almost verbatim that with all the CGI and such they did for the Frighteners, they were left with all this technology. So why not tackle something as tremendous as Tolkien's work? My history with the Frighteners has become more and more interesting as the years go by. The primary reason why I found the film and watched it was Michael J. Fox. I've been a fan of his since I was a small child. Through this, I was introduced to Dee Wallace, Jeffrey Combs, Peter Jackson, even the song Don't Fear the Reaper. It's one of the movies that I immediately placed in my favorites. Before I even got into horror, every time I saw it was on TV, I would watch it. And obviously, it has only solidified its place in my favorites list, right next to Phantom of the Paradise. I feel pretty confident in saying it won't be going anywhere. I truly wish more people would check this movie out and talk about it, because it deserves far more attention. I would recommend The Frighteners to comedy horror fans, paranormal enthusiasts, fans of, well, any of the well-known horror actors here, and anyone who would like to see what came before Middle-earth. See you later. If you're looking for more paranormal horror, check out my reviews of The Fog 1980 and Ghost Story 1981. Thank you to my patrons Michael Musail, The Horror Show, Bronson Wright Wolf, Diana Mo, Sean Sheridan, and Raiders AK for supporting the channel.